I knew something was off. I couldn't place it at first, but I felt it deep in my bones. It was as if the world around me had begun to shift into a shade of gray I couldn't shake off. The woman I had loved for years, my wife Amanda, seemed different. It was subtle at first, small things that wouldn't make sense to anyone else, but to me, they were like the sound of a distant storm rumbling. Something was brewing. One evening, I came home early from work, hoping to surprise her. I opened the front door, and there she was, Amanda, standing in the kitchen, her back turned to me as she hummed to herself. I noticed her phone lying casually on the counter, screen up. But there was something about the way the screen glowed in the dim kitchen light that caught my attention. The message was brief, just a few words, same time tonight. Can't wait to see you. I froze. My heart began to hammer in my chest. The room suddenly felt suffocating, and my mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. It was the way the message was worded, too casual, too intimate. It could have been from a friend, but something in my gut told me it wasn't. I reached out instinctively, my fingers brushing the phone. The moment I picked it up, Amanda turned around, her smile dropping instantly when she saw me standing there, holding her phone. Her eyes narrowed, almost defensively. I don't know why, but her face flushed as if I had just caught her in the act. That's when I knew. I just knew. The voice in my head screamed at me, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Words felt pointless now, didn't they? Instead, I dropped the phone back on the counter, my anger slowly building up. Who's that? I asked, my voice low, trying to keep it together. Her response came quickly, almost too quickly. It's nothing, she said, waving it off like it was an insignificant detail. Just one of my friends. We were talking about dinner plans. Dinner plans? My gut twisted into knots. The lies. It was so obvious now. She wasn't even trying to cover her tracks. That's when I knew I had to get the truth, whatever the cost. My blood boiled in my veins as a surge of adrenaline hit me. I had spent years building a life with this woman, and now it felt like she was shattering everything with every word she spoke. She saw my expression, the way my jaw tightened, and tried to play it off as a joke. Come on, babe, you're overreacting, she said with a laugh, her eyes avoiding mine. It's really nothing. You're being ridiculous. Ridiculous? No, I wasn't the ridiculous one. The ridiculous one was the woman standing in front of me, acting like I was the problem. She could see the doubt in my eyes, the skepticism written all over my face, but instead of offering the truth, she only doubled down. You know I'm not the kind of person who would ever cheat on you, she said, her voice all sugar and sweetness, as though she was the one who'd been wronged. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies, and I had no way to get out. The woman I had trusted, the one who swore she loved me, was hiding something. Something big. And it was right there, right in front of me. The knot in my stomach grew tighter as my mind churned, trying to make sense of everything. It wasn't the first time I'd felt this way. There had been other moments, too. The late nights, the evasive answers, the way she'd become more distant over the past few months. But I had brushed it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. Now, all those little things suddenly connected. And the thing that stood out the most wasn't just the message. It was her reaction. She was nervous. Too nervous. And that was something I'd learned the hard way: when someone is too nervous, it usually means they're hiding something. She tried to act casual, but I saw through it. I knew her better than anyone else. There was no way in hell she was telling me the whole truth. But how far had this affair gone? How deep was the betrayal? I couldn't stop the questions from flooding my mind. The storm was closing in. I couldn't stand there much longer, pretending that everything was fine. I turned on my heel, walking toward the living room, trying to breathe through the rage that was building inside me. Amanda followed me, her footsteps tentative, unsure. She knew I wasn't buying her lies anymore. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure I even wanted to. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice a little too sharp, a little too forced. I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed my jacket from the couch and headed for the door. She stood there for a moment, watching me, then rushed over. "You're not seriously leaving, are you?" I didn't know what I was doing. Part of me just wanted to get the hell out of that house, get away from her, but the other part of me, the part that had spent years with her, wanted the truth. I needed it, and I needed it now. I turned to face her, my eyes cold, the anger I'd been holding back finally spilling over. "Don't make me leave, Amanda. I'm not in the mood for your games anymore. You owe me the truth." Her face contorted for a second, then she straightened, her voice icy. "What do you think you're going to do? Storm out and act like you're some big martyr? Get over yourself." I shook my head. "You're unbelievable." It wasn't just her words. It was the way she said them, with such ease, like there was nothing at stake. She didn't even seem remotely affected by the fact that I just caught her in the middle of what I could only assume was an affair. "You're so dramatic," she muttered, crossing her arms. "You're acting like I've done something unforgivable. This is all in your head. You're being insecure." I let out a bitter laugh. "Insecure? Is that what this is? Me being insecure? No, Amanda, this is about you lying to my face. This is about you disrespecting me, and this is about you throwing away everything we've built together because you can't keep your pants on." She flinched at that, but her arrogance didn't fade. Instead, she stepped forward, getting in my face. "And what do you expect me to do? You think I'm going to apologize for being a woman with needs? I've been stuck in this miserable marriage for years, trying to make you happy, pretending everything's fine when it's not. I'm tired of playing the perfect wife, pretending I'm happy while you're so self-absorbed in your little world that you can't see what's right in front of you." I couldn't believe my ears. She was telling me that I was the problem. She was the one who'd been sneaking around behind my back, and yet I was the one to blame. Her words were poison, and they dug into my chest like a blade. But there was something else stirring inside me now. Something cold. Something darker. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was disgusted. "Then why don't you just be honest, Amanda?" I said, my voice low, steady. "Tell me the truth. Who is he? Who's the guy you've been sleeping with?" Her eyes shifted, a quick flicker of guilt, but only for a moment. She was too well trained in this game, too good at hiding her true feelings. She smirked. "Oh, so you think I'm cheating on you? Are you that pathetic?" "Don't play stupid," I snapped. "I know. I saw the message. I'm not blind." She hesitated, just for a second. Then, she leaned in close, as if she was going to kiss me, but her lips just brushed against my ear, and her words were a venomous whisper. "So what if I am? Maybe it's none of your business anymore." I recoiled from her touch. It felt like poison. Like I was standing in the middle of a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "Where is he, Amanda?" I asked again, this time my voice barely above a whisper. The silence stretched between us like a rope about to snap. She scoffed, stepping back. "You want to meet him? Is that what you want? So you can see what you're missing? Fine. I'll tell you where he is." I stared at her, the words hanging in the air like smoke. My mind was racing, but I didn't know what I was hoping to hear. She was unraveling, but I wasn't sure if I could bring myself to push any further. Would the truth set me free, or would it just destroy me even more? But the next thing I knew, she was already pulling her phone from her pocket, typing something quickly. "He's at the bar down the street," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Now, go ahead and have your little confrontation, if it makes you feel better. I don't care. Her indifference sent a cold shiver down my spine. I had no idea what I was doing. I knew I should leave. I knew I should just walk away, get out of this toxic nightmare. But something inside me, something primal, refused to let go. I grabbed my coat again, my hand trembling now as I walked to the door. You have no idea what you've done, I muttered under my breath. And just before I stepped outside, I turned back to her, my eyes locking onto hers, a promise hanging in the air. You will regret this, I said quietly. Then, I left. I didn't look back. I walked out into the cold night air, every step heavier than the last. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and rage, each thought slamming into the next. I had no plan. I didn't even know if I wanted answers anymore, but somehow I was drawn toward that bar she'd mentioned. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. It was the adrenaline, the fire inside me, that wouldn't let me stop moving. I could already feel the weight of the betrayal crashing over me again and again like waves on a rocky shore. The more I thought about Amanda's words, the more I wanted to strangle the life out of the man who'd taken her from me. Her lover, I thought bitterly, clenching my fists at my sides. I could almost feel the heat in my face as I imagined his smug grin, the same grin I'd never seen but now despised more than anything. The thought of him was unbearable. As I approached the bar, the neon lights flickered above, casting a sickly glow on the street. The place was nearly empty, save for a few scattered patrons nursing drinks, their conversations a dull hum in the background. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but instinct guided me forward. There, in the corner booth, sat a man, slightly older than me, dressed in a jacket too expensive for a dive bar. His posture screamed confidence, maybe even arrogance. His eyes were locked on his phone, oblivious to the world around him. I recognized him instantly. It was him. My heart pounded in my chest, but I pushed forward, refusing to let fear stop me. I walked straight toward the booth, my breath shallow and quick, and before he could even look up, I was standing right in front of him. He blinked a couple of times, surprised by the sudden intrusion. He looked me over, then his eyes narrowed in recognition. A smirk played at the corner of his lips. Can I help you? His voice was casual, almost dismissive. He clearly didn't recognize the gravity of the situation. You're the one, I said, my voice a little more forceful than I intended. You're the one who's been screwing my wife. His smirk faltered for a moment. The confidence he had just a second ago seemed to drain from him. What the hell are you talking about? His voice had an edge now, but it was laced with uncertainty. I didn't give him the chance to backpedal. Don't lie to me. I know about you and Amanda. I know everything. My hands were clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms, but I couldn't stop myself from speaking. You think she's some prize, don't you? You think you've won? You're nothing. You're just a coward hiding behind her. His expression flickered, anger mixed with guilt. He sat up straighter, trying to compose himself. But I could see through him now. He wasn't the man he thought he was. He was just another fool who thought he could take what didn't belong to him. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. But there was a crack in it. A moment of fear, just beneath the surface. I smiled, a cold, calculated smile. Oh, I do know. I know enough to know you're not leaving here without facing the consequences. My voice was flat, dead serious, and the anger that had been bubbling inside me now came to a boiling point. The man's eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. I wasn't leaving until I had the satisfaction of making him feel just a fraction of what I felt. Listen, man, he began, voice pleading now, I didn't mean to get involved with your wife. It just happened. I didn't know she was married. You've got to understand. I cut him off, my voice dangerously low. Don't give me that crap. She knew exactly what she was doing. This isn't about me. It's about you, and the choices you made. I leaned in, close enough now that I could feel his breath. His face was pale, and he was trembling just slightly. You don't get to walk away from this. Not after what you've done. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could get another word out, I slammed my fist into the side of his face. The impact was satisfying, though the blood didn't hit me the way I'd imagined. It was all too easy to shatter that confidence of his, but the pain I wanted to inflict wasn't on his face. No, it was on the inside, the guilt, the shame. His head jerked back from the force, and he grunted, his eyes widening in shock. I could feel the tremor in his hands as he reached up to touch his swollen cheek, and I knew he had no idea what he was dealing with. The emotional rage had twisted into something else, something cold and vengeful. I had nothing left to lose now. Get up, I ordered. You're going to show me where she's at. You're going to tell me exactly where she's been, and you're going to make it right. He hesitated, a coward through and through. I grabbed him by the collar and yanked him to his feet. The man was breathing fast, panic setting in. You don't understand, he said, his voice cracking. I can't. I shoved him hard, sending him stumbling backward into the booth. You can, and you will. My voice was steady, but the storm inside me was far from over. He slowly got to his feet, his face a mix of fear and regret, but there was still defiance in his eyes. He'd made his choices, and now he had to face them. Where is she? I asked again, my voice ice cold. She's at home, he muttered, shaking his head as if he couldn't believe this was happening. She told me she was leaving you. I didn't know what you. I didn't hear the rest. The words were meaningless now. Amanda's betrayal had become something I had to confront head-on. And as I turned to leave, I knew what I had to do next. I didn't even let him finish his sentence. The words echoed in my head, a sickening confirmation of everything I'd suspected but never fully wanted to accept. She was leaving me. The weight of it crashed over me like a tidal wave, and for a moment, I could hardly breathe. The man in front of me, trembling with a mix of fear and guilt, barely registered as my focus zeroed in on that single, damning truth. Amanda had planned it. She had been plotting this all along. And I had been blind. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was abandoning everything we had, everything I believed we were, just like that. I looked at him one last time, and something cold washed over me, like a shadow that overtakes the light. You think I'm going to let this go? I whispered, barely above a breath. The words were more for myself than for him. His eyes widened. He seemed to understand the gravity of the situation now, realizing that the man standing in front of him wasn't someone to be toyed with anymore. He wasn't looking at me like a cuckold or a fool. I wasn't playing the part he might have assumed when he first started his little affair. No. I was a man pushed to the edge, a man who had nothing left to lose. I turned on my heel and left the bar without a second glance. My mind was a battlefield. I had no clear plan. No clear goal. All I knew was that I needed to see her. I needed to confront her. I needed to see her face when I told her that I knew the truth. When I told her that everything was over. The drive home felt like an eternity. The streets blurred by, the dim lights from passing cars streaking through my vision like a twisted dream. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles were white. Every fiber of my being wanted to pull the car over and scream. Scream at the injustice of it all. Scream at the woman who had once been my everything. When I finally parked in front of the house, I didn't even bother to turn off the engine. I just sat there, the low rumble of the engine the only sound filling the silence. The house loomed ahead of me, familiar, yet unrecognizable. This place, once a symbol of comfort, had become the cage of my betrayal. I got out of the car, my steps slow and deliberate. The front door was unlocked, just like it always was when Amanda was inside. I didn't bother to knock. I didn't need to. She was already expecting me, whether she knew it or not. As I stepped inside, the smell of her perfume hit me first. It was a scent I used to associate with love and warmth, but now it only made my stomach turn. The house was eerily quiet, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the stillness. She was here. I moved toward the living room, the walls seeming to close in on me with every step. And then, I saw her. Amanda. Sitting there, looking so calm, so composed, as if nothing had changed. Her hair was messy, her eyes distant, like she was lost in thought, waiting for me to walk through the door. When she saw me, her eyes briefly flickered with something. Fear? Guilt? But she quickly masked it, flashing a smile that was too perfect. Too fake. "Hey, babe," she said, as if we hadn't just been living in different worlds for the past few months. "How was your day?" I didn't even answer. I couldn't. Instead, I walked toward her, my mind a blur of anger and pain, but somehow, still, I was in control. I needed her to feel what I was feeling. I needed her to understand that her lies had consequences. "You think I don't know?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 broken promises. "You think you can lie to me forever?" "I know everything, Amanda." Her face went white, her lips parting slightly as if she had been struck. She stood up from the couch, but her legs were shaky. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, but even she couldn't hide the panic creeping into her voice. "You don't get to do this," I said, my words cutting through the air. "You don't get to play me like a fool. You've been sleeping with him. You've been planning to leave me. You think I'm too stupid to figure it out?" Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening. I don't know what you're talking about," she managed to get out, her voice wavering. "You're crazy. You're just..." I couldn't hear it anymore. I couldn't hear her lie to my face one more time. The anger that had been bubbling under the surface for so long exploded, and without thinking, I grabbed her by the wrist and pulled her toward the dining table. "Don't lie to me anymore," I growled. My grip tightened, and she gasped in pain, but I didn't care. "You're done. We're done. I don't care what you say. You've already made your choice." Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't find the sympathy I once had for her. All I felt now was betrayal, raw and painful, like a deep wound that wouldn't heal. "You have no right to," she began, but her voice was weak now, desperate. "No right?" I shouted, cutting her off. "You don't get to make demands. You don't get to act like the victim. I know what you've been doing, Amanda." And with that, I let go of her wrist. She stumbled back, her breath coming in short gasps, eyes wide with disbelief. I was done. As I turned and walked out of the room, I felt a strange emptiness settle over me. The anger was still there, but it didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered anymore. I was walking away from a life I had built, and I didn't know what would come next. But I wasn't about to let her drag me down with her lies. I had to go. I had to be free. The door closed behind me, and I didn't look back. I could hear her faint cries behind me as I left, but I didn't stop. The sound only spurred me forward, each step pulling me further away from the life I thought I had. I could almost feel the weight of everything crashing down on me. My legs felt numb, my mind a void, but something told me to keep moving, to keep leaving it all behind. I didn't care about the house anymore. I didn't care about the promises. I didn't care about Amanda. All I cared about was escaping. I had to go. I needed air, space, silence. I needed to be free from her lies, her manipulation. The night wrapped around me like a cloak, cold but oddly comforting, as if the world itself was telling me it was okay to let go. I walked to my car, my footsteps quick and uneven, but the pounding of my heart was deafening in my ears. I didn't even know where I was going. My brain was fogged with the shock of everything, the betrayal still fresh, still raw. But I couldn't stay there. Not now. Not with her. I climbed into my car and slammed the door shut, my hands shaking on the wheel. For a moment, I just sat there, staring into the empty street, trying to gather myself. I needed to breathe. I needed to feel something other than the bitterness that was filling me up, threatening to spill over. I put the car in gear, my foot heavy on the gas, and drove. The world outside blurred by, and I let my thoughts drift. They were like wildfire, too fast to control, too chaotic to tame. I remembered the first time I met Amanda, how her smile had seemed like it could light up an entire room. How I had believed in her, trusted her, loved her. I thought we had something special. But all of that was just a lie. The city passed in the rearview mirror, the lights dimming in the distance as I drove into the unknown. I had no destination. No plan. But something deep inside told me I had to keep moving. I don't know how much time had passed when I finally found myself in the middle of nowhere, a stretch of road with nothing around but the hum of the engine and the night. I pulled over, turned off the car, and sat there in silence. The emptiness in my chest had expanded, and for the first time in a long while, I let myself feel it. I wasn't angry anymore. At least not in the way I had been. What I felt now was something deeper. Something darker. A hollow ache that gnawed at my insides. I had spent so long building my life around her, around the idea of us, and now, nothing was left. She had taken everything. She had stolen my trust, my love, and now she had taken my peace. I wanted to scream, but there was no one to hear it. No one to share the pain. I felt so alone. So utterly alone. She had lied, and she had left me to pick up the pieces. But I didn't know how to put it back together. I didn't even know if I wanted to anymore. There were no answers coming. No answers that would make it better. No way to take away the bitterness, the heartbreak. It was just me now. Just me and the night. I don't know how long I sat there, my mind numb, my hands gripping the wheel, but eventually, I opened the door and stepped outside. The night air hit me like a wave, cold and sharp. It reminded me that I was still here. Still breathing. Still alive. And as I stood there, looking out into the void of darkness, I realized something. I wasn't sure how I was going to move forward. I wasn't sure what my next step would be. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of something new, a sense of strength. I wasn't broken. Not yet. And maybe that's all I needed to know right now. I wasn't done. Not yet. I turned back to my car and got in, my hands still trembling, but there was a determination building inside me. I didn't have the answers. I didn't have a plan. But I had my life. And I would figure out what to do with it. As I started the car and pulled back onto the road, I didn't know where I was going. But I knew one thing, I wasn't going back to her. I wasn't going to stay in that house, in that lie. I was moving forward. And I would be okay. I had to be. The engine hummed beneath me as I navigated through the dark, aimless roads. The world felt like a distant blur, my mind trapped in the aftermath of everything that had shattered in the past few hours. I was supposed to be in control, supposed to have some sort of understanding of what was happening. But I didn't. I was spiraling, and the road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, like a metaphor for the uncertainty I now found myself in. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt this lost. Amanda had always been my anchor, the person I leaned on, and now she was nothing more than a stranger whose face I could barely recognize. The woman I loved had become a stranger who had deceived me. I should have known something was off. I should have picked up on the signs, but I had been blind, too trusting, too naive. Her smile, once so comforting, now felt like a betrayal. The scent of her perfume lingered in my mind, reminding me of every moment we'd shared, every promise we made. But now those moments seemed hollow, built on lies. She had been so convincing, so sure of herself, I never once questioned her. I didn't even realize how deep she had buried her deceit until I saw the truth for myself. The rage inside me had simmered down, but it wasn't gone. There was something else now, something colder, more calculating. It wasn't anger anymore, it was a deep, gnawing sense of betrayal that left me feeling hollow. I had been used. Manipulated. My trust had been taken for granted. And all I had left now was this empty space, this void that seemed to consume me from the inside out. I passed through unfamiliar streets, the city lights flickering in the distance, their glow a faint reminder of a life I had once known. It didn't feel like home anymore. Nothing felt familiar. The thought of Amanda haunted me, but I couldn't let myself turn back. No matter how much my heart ached, I couldn't allow myself to fall into that trap again. She had made her choice. She had chosen him, and she had left me in the wreckage. I pulled into a parking lot, unsure why I had even stopped. The car idled quietly, the silence surrounding me almost suffocating. I rested my hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead, but there was nothing in front of me but the dark expanse of the night. My chest was tight with emotions I couldn't name, hurt, confusion, resentment, and yet, there was something else, relief. Relief? It seemed strange to feel it, but in some way, I had been freed. Freed from the chains of a relationship that was nothing but lies. Freed from the fantasy I had built up in my head. It didn't make the hurt go away, but it gave me space. Space to breathe. To heal. I wasn't sure what was next. The thought of going back to the house, of seeing her again, of confronting her further, made my stomach churn. I couldn't face that. I couldn't let her manipulate me any longer. She had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs. It was strange, feeling so numb, yet strangely calm at the same time. I wasn't sure what the future held for me. The idea of starting over, of moving forward without her, seemed impossible. But I had to. I had to get past this. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, a sharp, quick release of the anger that had been boiling under the surface. But it didn't feel like enough. It didn't satisfy the hunger for justice, for retribution. The truth had already settled in my mind. There was nothing I could do to change what had happened. But I would never let her forget what she had done. I would make sure of that. I turned the car off, and sat there in the silence for a long while. My body ached from the tension, from the emotions that were tearing me apart, but I was still here. I was still standing. The realization settled over me like a weight. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her leave me in ruins. She might have broken me for a moment, but she hadn't taken everything from me. I still had my dignity. I still had my pride. I pulled myself together, wiped my face, and started the car once more. There was nothing for me back there, no more lies to unravel, no more false hope. I had nothing left to fight for with her. But I wasn't going to crawl into a hole and let the darkness consume me. I was going to take that first step forward, no matter how hard it was. The road ahead might have been unclear, but I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to keep looking back. No more. I couldn't afford to. The anger, the sadness, they would pass. But the strength I would find in moving forward? That would be mine forever. I took a left turn, the headlights cutting through the night, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt like I was headed somewhere, even if I didn't know where. And that was enough for now. I didn't know if I would ever find closure or forgiveness. But I knew that in this moment, I was finally taking control. And that was all I could do. The night stretched on, my mind racing even though my body moved in a haze. I wasn't sure where I was heading, but I knew that being in motion, even aimless, was better than being still, better than returning to that house where everything had crumbled. The road I had chosen seemed endless, just like the thoughts tumbling through my brain, each one more jarring than the last. Amanda's face flickered in my mind, her fake smile that once made me feel safe, her eyes that now felt hollow, a mirror of everything that had just broken. The betrayal wasn't just in the affair, it was in every little thing she did to keep me in the dark. Her lies ran deeper than the surface. How long had she been planning this? How many little things had I missed? It was a dark realization to come to, that all those years, those smiles, the whispered, "I love yous," had been nothing but a well-practiced act. And somehow, I had been so blind, so caught up in my own desire to believe in what we had, that I hadn't even seen the cracks. As I passed a small diner, I turned into the parking lot. The headlights reflected off the dirty windows, and for a moment, I just stared at the sign, trying to bring myself back to the present. The quiet buzz of the neon lights was almost soothing. I wasn't ready to be alone with my thoughts again. I stepped out of the car, my legs shaky as I made my way inside. The bell above the door jingled, the soft sound almost like an echo of my feelings. There weren't many people inside, just a few regulars, their heads down, focused on their food or their phones. I walked past them, taking a seat in the back corner, where the shadows swallowed me whole. A waitress came by, a young woman with kind eyes. She asked if I wanted a coffee, and I nodded. I didn't care what it was. I just needed something to hold on to distract myself from the chaos that was spinning in my mind. She placed the coffee on the table and left, and I was alone again. My thoughts clashed with each other in a brutal dance, each memory of Amanda a slap in the face, a reminder of how little I knew about the woman I had married. And how easily she had destroyed me. But there was something else too, something that I couldn't ignore. Anger. A fury that had been bubbling beneath the surface for so long, and now, it was spilling over. It was hard to deny it. She hadn't just lied to me. She hadn't just taken another man into our bed. No, it was more than that. She had disrespected me in ways I hadn't even realized. I could still hear her voice in my head, the way she had tried to justify herself earlier. "You're crazy. You're overreacting. It wasn't what you think." But I knew better now. I knew what it was. I knew what she had been doing. And I wasn't going to let her play me for a fool anymore. I took a sip of the coffee, the bitterness mixing with the sour taste in my mouth. It burned, but it felt like the only thing that could match the rage inside me. A sudden thought struck me, was this who I had become? This broken man, sitting alone in a diner, stewing in my anger, my sadness? Was I letting her win by letting myself wallow in this pain? She had already taken so much from me. My trust. My security. My peace of mind. But I wasn't done yet. I couldn't let her win. I had to keep moving forward, somehow. I stood up, pushing the chair back with a sharp scrape. The waitress looked at me as I left, her expression unreadable. I didn't care. I didn't care about anything anymore except getting out of my head. I couldn't think of her, of the life we had built, the lies she had spun, any longer. I stepped back outside, the cold air biting at my skin. The world around me seemed so distant, so removed from what I had just gone through. It was as if everything was moving, and I was standing still. I got back into my car, the familiar hum of the engine comforting in its monotony. But even as I drove, I felt myself slipping, the anger surging again. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. There had to be something I could do. Something that would give me control back. I couldn't keep driving forever. Eventually, I'd have to face it, the mess she had left me with. The broken promises. The lies. But that didn't mean I had to face it on her terms. The thought of confronting her again filled me with a sickening dread. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear her lies anymore. But there was a part of me that knew, no matter how much I wanted to avoid her, no matter how much I wanted to pretend she didn't exist, I had to face the truth. I couldn't keep running. I made a sudden decision, the only one that made sense. I was going to cut her out of my life, completely. There was no going back, no reconciling what had been broken. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know what she had done to me. I couldn't keep pretending it didn't hurt. I turned the car around, heading back to the house. It was time. Time to face everything she had done. Time to end this chapter once and for all. As I pulled into the driveway, my heart raced. The house loomed ahead, dark and silent, like it was waiting for me. I wasn't sure what I would say to her, but it didn't matter. It was time for the final confrontation. Time to put an end to the lies. Time to leave her, and everything she had taken from me, behind. No more running. I stepped out of the car, my feet crunching against the gravel as I walked toward the door. It felt like the universe had shifted beneath me, the air thick with everything that had led to this moment. I wasn't just walking into the house anymore, I was walking into my own fate. The culmination of everything I had allowed myself to endure, everything I had ignored for so long. I had given her so much, and in return, she had shattered me. But now, it was my turn. I wasn't the broken man anymore. I wasn't the victim. I reached the door, the familiar sight of the front step now a distant memory, something that belonged to another life. A life I no longer wanted to live. I knocked once. It echoed through the quiet night, loud and final. A few moments later, the door opened. She stood there, her expression unreadable, her eyes still holding the remnants of her lies. The same look she had given me when she first betrayed me. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't seeing her through rose-colored glasses. I saw her for who she really was. And I was done. "Is there something you want?" she asked, her voice defensive, still feigning innocence. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before I spoke, but I felt calm, too calm. The fire inside me had burned through all the rage, all the anger, leaving only the truth. I was no longer waiting for apologies. I was no longer looking for answers. I had nothing left to ask. "I know what you did," I said, my voice unwavering. Her face tightened, eyes flashing with panic. "What are you talking about?" she asked quickly, but her words betrayed her. There was a crack in her facade. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small box, the one thing I had held on to for days. Her lover's ring. The one she had left behind in her rush to cover her tracks. It had taken me a while to find him, to track down the pieces of this horrific puzzle, but in the end, I had everything I needed. I threw the ring onto the floor in front of her. It landed with a soft clink. Her breath hitched, and she took a step back, her hand instinctively going to her mouth as if trying to silence the truth from escaping. "You know," I continued, my voice cutting through the tense air like a blade, "I've seen everything. I've heard everything. And I'm done being your fool." Her eyes began to water, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The silence between us spoke louder than any words could. The truth was all around us, suffocating us in its weight. "I tried," I said, the words heavy in my chest. "I tried to love you, tried to trust you, tried to make this work. But you," I stopped, shaking my head as if to clear away the fog. "You didn't just cheat on me. You killed the man I was. The man who thought he had a future with you. You destroyed everything we were." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't the one who needed to apologize. She was. You had everything, I went on, my voice quieter now, as if I were speaking to myself. And you threw it all away. You thought you could do this to me and get away with it. But you're wrong. You're not going to keep running. Not from me. Not from the truth. For a moment, I thought she might collapse, but she didn't. Instead, she stood there, a broken version of the woman I had once adored. But she wasn't mine anymore. And the weight of that realization was more liberating than anything I had ever felt. Get out, I said, the words burning with finality. Get out of my life. She opened her mouth again, but no words came. The look in her eyes was one of pure fear, of everything unraveling in front of her. But it was too late. There was nothing she could say that would change what had already been done. No tear, no apology, no excuse could undo the damage she had caused. I turned away without looking back, and as I walked toward the door, I heard her behind me, her voice shaking, calling my name. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I had nothing left to say to her. I had given her everything. But now, I was reclaiming it all. I stepped outside, into the cold night air. The darkness was vast, infinite, but I felt a strange peace settling over me. This was it. This was the end of the story I never asked for, the story that had been written in lies, betrayal, and heartache. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was still here. I was still standing. I had lost everything, but in doing so, I had found myself. The man I was supposed to be. The man I was always meant to become. Strong, resolute, unbroken. I closed the door behind me, and as the sound of the lock clicked into place, I finally understood something. No one could break me unless I let them. And I wasn't going to let anyone break me again.